This video is brought to you by NordVPN. On Thursday, the Bank of England announced that it would be raising interest rates from 4.25% to 4.5%. This is the bank's 12th successive raise in a row, and it means that interest rates are now at a 15-year high. As you probably already know, the reason that the bank has had to raise interest rates is to bring down inflation, which, according to the latest data from March, is currently running at 10.1% in the UK. Now, while it's true that most of the world is struggling with higher than average inflation, the problem is particularly pronounced in the UK. In the EU, for example, inflation is just 7%, and in the US, it's now below 5%. So in this video, we're going to look at why inflation is quite so high in the UK, whether the Bank of England can really do anything about it, and whether it has anything to do with Brexit. Hint, it probably does. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So let's start by taking a look at how the UK's inflation rate compares to other countries. As we mentioned a second ago, the UK's inflation rate is well above that of the US and the EU as a whole, but it's also above literally every other individual Western European country. The closest country is Austria, which has a year-on-year inflation rate of 9.2%. But the difference becomes particularly pronounced if you compare the UK to similarly large European economies. Italy, for example, has an inflation rate of 8.2%, Germany 7.8%, and France just 6.6%. So what's going on here? Why is UK inflation so much higher than that of not just the US, but its European peers? Well, as we see it, there are three main reasons: food, energy, and a tight labour market. And these have all been exacerbated by Brexit. Anyway, the most significant factor here is energy. Energy accounts for something like a third of all inflation, and British consumer energy prices were 79% higher in March than their level 2 years earlier, the biggest increase in Western Europe. Now, this might come as a surprise to anyone living in the UK, because, as you probably know, the UK government has capped the price of gas and electricity via the so-called energy price guarantee, which means the average household won't pay more than £2,500 in energy bills per year. When the plan was first announced, it was decried by parts of the commentariat as unsustainably expensive, and there were reports it could cost the Treasury, which was already struggling with record-high borrowing costs, upwards of £100 billion a year. So if the UK is splurging all this money to subsidise energy, why are consumer prices still so high? Similarly, why haven't prices come down as the wholesale price of gas in Europe, i.e. the amount that energy suppliers pay for gas before they sell it to consumers, is now back to pre-war levels? In the rest of Europe, lower wholesale prices have brought consumer prices back down to basically pre-war levels and below the UK. So why is this? Why are energy prices so high in the UK and less responsive to wholesale prices than those in Europe? Well, it's in part because the UK has worse insulated housing stock and is more reliant on gas for heating than your average European country. But the main reason here is the UK's broken energy market. Even if wholesale prices are coming down, British consumers still have to foot the bill for the 30 or so suppliers that went bust last year, which could cost as much as £9 billion. Given there are 8 million households in the UK, this means it could cost as much as £1,100 per household, despite the fact that it's clearly not the consumer's fault that these companies collapsed. Rather, it's because poorly thought-through regulations in the 2010s encouraged the creation of a whole load of undercapitalised new suppliers. The UK energy system also uses a marginal costing model, which basically means that the wholesale price is set that the most expensive producer can make a profit from the sales they make into the wholesale energy market. Because gas generation is far more expensive than, say, solar or nuclear, this means consumers are paying more to protect gas-powered electricity producers, which is why the big UK energy producers like Centrica actually posted record profits last year. Finally, an investigation by Bloomberg from March revealed that energy producers have literally been blackmailing consumers into paying higher prices. In December, for example, when demand was high because people were trying to heat their homes, traders from Vitol Group's VPI Power Limited abruptly turned off one of London's largest power stations and said they wouldn't restart it unless the national grid paid quadruple the market rate. To avoid a blackout, that's exactly what they did. This so-called on-off manoeuvre, which is essentially blackmail, has become increasingly popular in the last few years and has pushed up consumer prices. So you get the idea. The UK's energy market allows producers to take irresponsible risks and blackmail consumers, all while guaranteeing certain companies make massive profits, which is why, even as wholesale costs come down, UK consumers are still paying through the nose for energy. Okay, on to the second reason, food. Food accounts for a fifth of headline inflation, and food prices are up 19.2%. We've actually done a whole video on this topic before, so go watch that if you want to know more. But the basic reason that food prices have gone up so much is that domestic production has fallen due to a combination of higher energy prices, bad government policy, and bad weather. And the UK has struggled to replace the shortfall with imports. The third reason is the UK's tight labour market. The UK doesn't have enough workers, which pushes up wages and the cost of services, which in turn pushes up inflation. Again, there are a variety of reasons for this, but one of the big ones is the fact that, since the pandemic, 500,000 Brits are still economically inactive due to a combination of chronic pain and mental health. The UK has also seen a surge in early retirement, which means fewer workers and more spenders. So those are the three main reasons that the UK's inflation rate is higher than the EU's. However, while it might not be the primary cause, in the background is Brexit. For example, Brexit is exacerbating labour shortages. Research from UK and a Changing Europe suggests Brexit caused a shortfall of 330,000 people in the UK labour force, including a shortfall of seasonal workers for picking fruit and veg, which is part of the reason why UK food prices are now so high. Brexit has also introduced new trade frictions, which makes life more expensive for your average Brit, and pushed down the value of the pound, which makes imports more expensive. So you get the idea. While it might not be the primary cause, Brexit definitely hasn't helped, and could be why the UK's inflation is greater than every other country in Western Europe. A few weeks ago, we were invited to Downing Street, where we were briefed on the government's anti-fraud plan. As part of this, we found out that more younger people have fallen victim to online scams than over 35s. And as our analytics frequently tell us, our audience skews younger, which means that you're likely in this age bracket. So if you want to protect yourself online, you should try NordVPN. NordVPN has a bunch of tools that keep you safe. First, they have a feature called Threat Protection, which protects you from malware, trackers, malicious ads, and phishing scams. But that's not all. NordVPN also has dark web monitoring services, which, even if you somehow do fall victim to online fraud or scams, notifies you if your details end up online, so you can promptly change your passwords and keep yourself protected. And what's more, if technology isn't really your thing, don't worry. NordVPN offers 24/7 customer support and even a 30-day money-back guarantee for all users. So check out our link in the description to get your discount on their 2-year plan, plus 4 extra months on top of that. Thanks for your support.